Welcome to Embedded, the show for people who love gadgets. I'm Elecia White, my co-host is Christopher White, and our guest this week is Vicky Tuite. As promised last week, she's going to tell us about electrifying trucks.
Hi Vicky, welcome to the show.
Hi Alicia and Chris.
Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, I've been in the electronics industry for 40 years now that I look back at it, if you start school. And I originally worked in Oregon at Tektronix, and they actually paid for my degree. And about 25 years ago, we moved down to Silicon Valley, and I've worked in lots of different companies. But they've all kind of had hardware-related software in common, and the software's been kind of similar, but the hardware has varied between electric cars, servers, graphic accelerators, hearing aids, and steam engines. And now I'm back on electric trucks.
Steam engines?
Steam engines.
Steam engines.
I not usually associate those with software.
Yes, in her LinkedIn, she has a section where she talks about doing hardware debugging, software development, and testing on the boards that monitor and control steam engines.
Yeah, that company is called TeraJoule, and it's still going. They're primarily energy storage. 30,000 gallons of water is a pretty cost-effective way to store energy. And the steam engines allow you to produce electricity and mechanical motion for driving a pump from the hot water and steam inside the tank.
I had this idea of a little car that you were running with a steam engine. I was kind of hoping for that. What you say makes so much more sense, but I hope you don't mind if I continue with the mental image.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's more the size of a half a car, maybe. And the pistons are about 6 inches across and about a foot or 8 inches long, and they have multi-pistons in each engine.
Some serious power, probably.
Yeah.
Or torque or something.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly the power ratings.
But you said it's like a
it's
generator storage mechanism.
Right. So it could produce 100 kilowatts 24/7.
Well, that's enough to kill someone.
No kilowatt. I mean, that's enough to power a few houses.
Yes.
Actually. Yes. A small village, and they heated their water with solar troughs.
Oh, okay.
And then a heat exchanger into the big tank.
So it's the big book of thermodynamics there. Everything, every kind of heat engine imaginable.
Yes, with a steam engine expert, of which there are very few, Robert Mirisch.
But now you're back to electric cars.
Yeah.
And while I said electrifying trucks, I think, except in the most wrong interpretation, that's not quite what EVAOS does?
EVAOS is some former Tesla people. I used to work there too.
At Tesla?
At Tesla Motors. Oh, it's been like 6 years ago now. How odd.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah. And EVAOS provides the battery pack, the battery monitoring system. We buy the drive control unit and the vehicle to grid unit from another company, also another Tesla-related startup. Oh, and we also do the drive shaft modification. We take the original drive shaft out and put in 2 shorter drive shafts with the motor in the middle.
So you're making a hybrid car.
Right.
Truck, actually.
Actually, a Ford F-150 or 250.
And so you take these stock cars and you modify them.
Right. In fact, we even have Fremont Ford doing a lot of the work for us.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's not battery powered. It's more like
it's a hybrid.
Prius.
It makes a very perky drive for a Ford F-150, and you get 40 miles per gallon while you're still in the hybrid mode range, which is about 30 miles.
Because unlike the Prius, which is kind of designed to be not a fast car, the Ford F-150s have a lot of power to start with, and this just adds torque.
Yeah, it does.
Especially at the low end, because of the electric motor.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Yeah, it gives it a lot of torque. So if you're pulling a heavy load, or primarily you just get you get double the mileage per gasoline.
This is a parallel hybrid where the gas and electric motor are both driving wheels?
Yeah, they're both.
Okay.
They're both. Well, you can have the gasoline engine by itself once you've run out of battery juice.
But it doesn't charge the battery from the engine like a Prius?
No, it doesn't.
So it's
you have to
pure plug-in. Okay.
Pure plug-in.
Ah, okay. And it looked like not only could you plug into it in order to give it power, but you could plug your tools into it.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's really cool. There have been so many times I wish I could have plugged something into my Prius that was, not...
Not 12 volt into the cigarette lighter. Yeah.
Yeah, the models we're doing for our government contract actually don't have that, but yeah, it's pretty easy to do to put a, it's not, I think we're intending to put an inverter that's driven off the pack eventually.
So you said government contract. Are these mostly government trucks or fleet vehicles or home
we have
vehicles?
a contract for 32 trucks that are destined for 4 military bases. And there's 4 other vendors in this program with us, like Nissan Leafs, Via Motors, Phoenix Motor Car, and one other I can't remember. And so they're all doing vehicle-to-grid projects. So all these cars will be plugged into the grid at night, and then there's 2 other companies doing energy management software. One company is making a smart charger in a box to control the charging, and another company is doing basically energy arbitrage detection. Say, it's going to be a good time to sell to the grid. Let's sell, but then they still have to make sure the cars are charged in the morning.
Right. So you just have to be smart about it. And a 32 doesn't sound like very many, really. Is this one of those prototype things where in the end you might get more, or is this just the government sticking its toe into electric vehicles?
There is a potential follow-on phase to this project, depending on how well the first phase does.
But you've done government's not the only thing EVAOS is working on. I know that when I talked to you before, it wasn't quite ready for people. My brother-in-law drives a F-150 and drives a lot.
He doesn't. It's a Chevy.
Oh, really? We'll do Chevys eventually.
If he ever hears this, I don't want him to get offended.
Our long-term plans.
Really?
I'm mostly kidding.
He drives some sort of
He drives a giant truck. Which he actually needs and uses, unlike a lot of people. So,
the guitar players in bands. You really do need that much space.
So eventually EVAOS would like to produce a kit for consumer trucks and sell them through Ford dealers. But that's a little bit way up, down the road.
And so now it's fleet trucks, which makes a lot of sense when you're talking about contractors and putting together 32 trucks.
Yeah.
How long does it take to pay off?
I think it's, 2 to 5 years, depending on your mileage. I think the sweet spot is 30 miles a day, most days. You'll save a lot in gasoline costs. And we think you will save some in truck maintenance. We think it'll be a lot easier on the engine and the transmission.
So given that the pure electric miles is, I think you said 40?
It's hybrid miles, actually.
Hybrid miles.
It's not pure electric.
Sure, okay, but in high efficiency mode.
Yeah, the engine's pretty well slacking and just not using half its normal gasoline.
So that's pretty much targeted toward sort of quasi-urban areas rather than Texas, where somebody might be going from one ranch to another 100 or 200 miles.
Yeah, things like airports where the truck is running around every day, but it doesn't really go very far.
Makes sense.
Or maybe contractors, who don't have to travel very far. But as we found at Tesla, 98% of most vehicle trips are 30 miles or less.
Right.
Yes. But everybody wants to be able to go further.
Yeah, yeah.
What if there's an emergency and I need to go 200 miles? Like, okay, in my life, that has happened once, maybe twice.
Well, sometimes you take trips that are longer that aren't necessarily emergencies.
But you can always plan those.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so we still have the gasoline engine as a backup.
Right. That is the nice thing about hybrids. Have you ever been quizzed about the environmental impact of batteries versus fuel savings? People ask me that, and I'm like, I don't know. I just wanted an electric car because I can solar power it.
Well, there's an aspect of our program that I'm not sure how much detail I can go into, but it involves repurposing the batteries in stationary applications after they're taken out of the trucks in about 3 years.
I did hear a rumor, Sam, about some other electric car companies doing something similar, where you're using old batteries to store charge in other places. Yeah,
I mean, batteries, until they totally go kaput, kind of degrade at a constant rate.
Well, and they are recyclable, even beyond repurposing them. I mean, they aren't completely just things that go into a landfill at the end of their lives.
Yeah, and these batteries are lithium poly, which are not, and they're not lead, and they're not lithium ion, which are kind of more dangerous than the lithium poly.
Do you have to do all of the software things to keep it safe? I mean, a lot of the car software needs to be much more safety conscious than, like, I don't know, sport watch software.
Yeah, we have a battery monitoring system, and we also have some environmental sensors, like impact sensor, or if the truck's on its side, we will disconnect the main contactor. But primarily the battery monitoring system is for keeping the batteries at about the same amount of charge, because overcharging one particular battery is bad for it, and it starts to degrade, and under discharging any one battery is even worse for the battery.
Under discharging? Like, not...
Yeah, I mean, if you let the voltage get too low, it's bad for these particular kind of batteries.
So you're saying if they're out of balance, most of the battery cells could be at 20%, but one could have gone down to 5%.
Yeah,
and that would be bad for the 5% cell.
Yeah. And so our battery monitoring system, which is it's based on chips made from Texas Instruments, which the TI guy told me that the Tesla Model S uses the same chip for this. It monitors the battery voltages and temperatures. And then we have a different chip that calculates state of charge.
That's a really tough problem, right?
It is.
Because lithium batteries tend to be at nearly the same voltage all the time.
Until they're not.
So you can't just look at the voltage and say, oh, it's 50%. Because that 50% may look a lot like 80%.
It does. There's a very flat curve until the drop-off. So, yeah, you can't look at voltage for state of charge. And also, the whole curve moves up and down depending on temperature.
That sounds like a nightmare.
So we're hoping that TI chip works fine.
This is why even with the small devices, there's often the fuel gauge chip, which is so critical to making sure you get reasonable lithium polymer battery states.
Yeah.
So what do you do for EVAOS?
4 engineers and 1 technician report to me. 2 of the guys are doing mostly analog, mixed signal, board level design. 1 guy is doing firmware, and 1 guy's a test engineer.
And so what do you do day to day?
I run around and try to keep them supplied with correct information, usually.
So manager, that's totally the definition of manager.
Well, keep them supplied with correct information, and don't tell them things they don't need to know.
Well, and I also try to keep them happy.
Yeah, occasionally give them a toy to play with.
Yeah, and then go to meetings and I try to badger the other companies that are our partners for information. And then in my spare time, I'm working on a Django project, which is our battery inventory system.
And you've been a manager before.
Yeah.
But for most of your career, it was more engineering.
That's right.
Why have you gone to the dark side?
My boss just gave me a promotion.
Yeah, that's what they always call it. I'm not so sure. But I mean, are you enjoying it? Were you looking forward to different challenges and all that, or there was nobody else?
Well, there was nobody else, but I'm not quite sure if he was aware that I had previous management experience.
Oh, I see.
But there was nobody else.
That's the way it usually goes, or at least that's the way it's gone in my past.
But since I've done it before, it's, in a way, it's order of magnitude more challenging because, I think some of us are engineers because we like to control things. And with people, it's just much more of a challenge that way.
It is. I've heard engineers go off on rants about how managers, why do they make more money? And the first time I was a manager, I swore I was never, ever going to have that rant again. Because it is hard.
Well, I've never actually been a manager where I made significantly more money.
It's never significantly more, although that's what the rumors say.
My first the second real management gig was at Sun when they were, just starting their big slide and they froze all promotions and office moving. So I didn't get to move to the nice, really good window office. And I actually didn't get my promotion.
You just got all the responsibilities?
Yeah.
So much for all of the rights and privileges. It's just the responsibility.
Yeah, that's really all I got. Well, plus I didn't have to do any more real work.
Exactly, real work. Even as a manager, you say that.
But that's not the case here. Well, although I have done a lot, less. Like I've uploaded gotten the microchip pick IDE working on my computer like months ago and haven't had to do it since because the firmware guy is taking care of it in a great, just fine.
It was always the hard thing when I was a manager is I had to have the compilers on. What if I needed to do something? And yet I would see them and I would be so sad when I opened Excel instead of a compiler.
Yeah, my theory on management is that managers should be willing to do the stuff that, the stuff that falls through the cracks and let the talented people do, the hard, interesting stuff. I mean, my job is interesting because it's so different every day. One of the things I have to do real soon is some investor outreach to some friends of mine.
It's weird to go to friends and say, "Can I have some money?"
Yeah.
Well, you do it more tactfully.
It's not like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I left my wallet at my desk. Can you cover me for lunch?" It's not quite that level.
Yeah, it's like, come on down and see what you're doing. And by the way, my boss has a new slide deck he wants to show you.
It's kind of like being invited to your neighbor's house for a Hawaii
Tupperware party
presentation.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Timeshare. Mental note, don't have lunch with Vicky anytime in the next month or two. You worked for Tesla, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
How is that the same? How is it different?
Tesla was so much bigger. And Tesla, since they're doing a whole car, they had to be so much more mindful of all sorts of, you have to crash test, you have to do FCC, all that other stuff. We're basically doing a hybrid conversion kit, and our partner is doing the UL testing for the vehicle to grid part. So we just have to make it work and make it safe. We probably have to do some EMI stuff, but we don't have a lot of regulations that we have to follow because we're considered, kind of an accessory to a vehicle, not the vehicle itself.
That's surprising. Is there a threshold beyond which you've made enough modifications to be considered something that has to be crash
You
tested?
have to replace 51% of the drivetrain.
Well, we've done that, but we haven't actually changed much else underneath the truck. There's a lot of brackets to hold things, but basically, and we tie in to various signals like the throttle and the shifter, but we don't actually do anything with them.
Which is fine as long as you tie in properly.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you managed to add this part of the drivetrain without having to find a lot of extra space or having to encroach upon usable space?
Well, the motor itself is barely bigger than a bread box.
Okay.
And then the rest of the battery pack goes in like a over-the-bed toolbox. So it is, many cubic feet, but it's kind of out of the way in a pretty safe place. And we even left 6 inches so you can slide some plywood underneath.
Was Ford helpful in putting all this together?
We have a good arrangement with 2 Ford dealers, and Ford itself is somewhat aware. I think it's a thing that they don't want to do themselves just yet. And they also said that our modifications would not void a warranty. So that's a very helpful thing to have.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Back to Tesla, actually. So you said it was much larger, but that was when were they doing the Model S, or was that when they were doing the
They were doing the
Lotus?
Roadster. I was employee 125, so it was still quite a lot of people, even in engineering.
It's funny. Some people say 125 and that's small, and other people say 125. That's gigantic.
Well, then at that time, 2 years later, they were at 300. And then 2 years later and one day, they were at 200.
Whoops.
That's why I'm no longer at Tesla.
I was going to ask, but now that makes sense. Whoops.
Yeah, it was kind of the dark before the dawn for Tesla. They were afraid they weren't going to get that $500 million DOE loan.
Yeah.
And, everything was costing more and taking longer.
Well, it was right around the time when doing anything that required capital was impossible.
Yeah. So a few months later, they got the loan and they resumed their hiring binge.
Now they have over 6,000 employees, so...
Yeah.
Well, and now they're shipping
Thousands
lots of cars.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of cars.
Yeah. And they're starting to fill up NUMMI, I've heard.
When we took a tour, and it was fantastic how much they had filled 2 years ago. It was just huge amounts of space of things. You don't really think of how much stuff has to go into a car until you walk around and you're like, oh, I guess if you are going to build 100 cars today, you're going to need 100 motors and 100 batteries and 100 doors of each kind.
Hundreds of each kind of switch and hundreds.
Yeah.
And it's all got to be there.
The cable assemblies were just boggling because...
Yeah, it looked less like a factory, more like an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. It's a logistic challenge for sure. Even, with our small battle trucks, it's one of our challenges.
Alison Chaikin was on the show, about a year ago, which means the show has probably missed another birthday and I forgot. But she said that cars have hundreds of microprocessors. How many are you adding? You mentioned 2.
Yeah, our system has 2. There's one in the drive control the drive control unit. There's another one in the V2G. And then our 2 other partner boxes each have one that I know of. So I think we're only adding 6. And they're all CAN bus ones.
Well, and you mentioned knowing when it's on its side, which may lead to a accelerometer. And I know the accelerometer I was playing with today definitely has a microcontroller in there.
Yeah, I guess
we don't count those.
No, I guess I didn't.
It's just it's a thing you buy and you.
And I suspect that our battery management ICs are more like microcontrollers than simple devices. Yeah, I didn't count those either. So
what else should I ask you about EVAOS? I mean, I kind of understand how it works, but what else is really cool?
We're hoping to expand to other types of vehicles, once we get this order done with. And I think we'd eventually like to do a pure EV vehicle ourselves, or make a modification to a stock vehicle and maybe, take out the gas engine entirely and put the batteries in there or something.
It does seem like the next step. It's interesting because I've always thought that trucks were well suited to hybridization, especially if you think about how trains work. Trains have always been, after they were steam engines, they're diesels hooked up to electric motors because they get so much torque that way. And it seems like that's a no-brainer for trucks. They should always have been that way.
Yeah, because they can hold the battery weight. Like I just bought a Ford C-Max Energy, and it's taking up half my trunk space with the battery pack.
That's the full That's the full electric.
No, it's the plug-in hybrid where I get 80% of my commute in pure EV mode, and then it goes to engine. But I am getting about 50 miles a gallon. I've filled up like 4.5 times, and I've got 2,800 miles on it.
Yeah. Christopher was saying not too long ago how much he did not miss gas stations.
I hate gas stations.
You have to get your hands dirty.
To stand there in the
bored, playing with your phone, getting
cold
it dirty.
California sun.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when my windshields get washed by me.
We have had a little bit of problem keeping the windshields clean. It's been one of the hard things with having the Prius is, it needs its windshield washers cleaned twice as often as it needs gas. So moving along to something entirely different, we talked on the show a little bit about the Hack Bright Hackathon that was supposed to be for women getting into hardware, new to hardware. And after talking to Angie on the show, she asked if I would give a little talk towards the end, and a rah, let's finish and go home and love hardware forever sort of thing. And when I saw you, I was sure you were there as a mentor because, this is not your first embedded system. But you weren't. What did you build there, and why? Why did you sneak in as a ringer on a team?
Well, a friend of mine had a friend who was sort of back in town and was interested in Arduino, and I told her about this, and I thought she would be more comfortable if I was on her team, so she'd know somebody. But even better, my daughter just moved back from living in Seattle for 7 years, and I wanted to work with her as a peer. So I'm sure I'll be doing it as a mentor eventually, but they seem like they were adequate mentors, and I just wanted to work on a team with my daughter.
What did you build?
We built this thing that, some of the tools that we were given was electric imp and this leap motion wave your hand
gesture recognition system,
and then there was another one by another company. So we had this kind of contrived game where you waved your hand over one thing and it went over the internet and told you what to do, and you could wave your hand over the other one.
Sort of a Simon Says, but with fingers?
Yeah, I was hoping to make it more of a, disabled person support thing where they could just sort of wave your hand in front of it without having to actually initiate a conversation, and then it's sort of like an easy check-in to the internet, to whoever might be monitoring. But
sort of that little ringy bell you get when you're sick, and instead this would be the silent version. Yeah,
but you wouldn't actually have to. I think some people feel guilty about disturbing people, so if they could just kind of wave their hand to say I'm okay, and the other person would get a text or something, or maybe the other person could respond somehow or there might be different hand motions for different things.
Yeah, you remind me, we had Maxwell on the show. Actually, you know Elizabeth Brunner.
Yeah.
And she came on the show to talk about her neighbor and worrying her neighbor would fall down and nobody would know. And so we built Maxwell, which was an electric imp. And if you didn't pat him every day, he would text your friends and family and say, just check in on the neighbor.
Yeah.
So
pretty similar concept, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's more of a niche for that. Checking in without being intrusive sorts of things. But now, having had Maxwell for not quite a year, but almost, when he doesn't work, it's really annoying. I don't know that I would give him to elderly someone for a long time. Because when he breaks, it's so annoying.
Why does he break? I mean, that just seems like a little bit of industrial engineering would make him...
Networks.
Oh,
Networks. Okay. Wi-Fi.
Okay.
They just... I mean, I know we've had some network problems here.
But that's just... but that's just the thing, is networks are never going to be, at least right now, they're never going to be perfect. So if we have problems that we can't solve, your random neighbor is going to be hopeless to solve them.
Right. Although maybe the part of the product could be the network, detection, and it might store up what happened, and then when the network does come back, because most outages come back pretty quickly, you could say, "Oh, she waved at me an hour ago. Everything's okay."
Yeah, the queuing. I don't think it does that right now, although it could. I remember thinking about doing it. But also, it doesn't, I don't know, the electric imp in our network lately has been very fussy. And I should have Matt back on the show and demand he tell us what's wrong. Debug, Matt. Debug right now. And it's a neat project. But even as I talk to more clients, because I'm kind of floating free right now looking for new contracts, some of them have been, oh, we're just going to do some easy Bluetooth low energy to monitor Alzheimer's patients. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting application and one I really think might be cool. But so far you've told me how to set it up, and your setup procedure takes an expert. So maybe reconsider.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm storing up a rant about electrical products and the elderly and how they just can't be difficult.
Oh, I forgot another not quite so important part of our project, but I did use Twilio as for texting. Send a text that somebody was ready to wave at you.
I was pretty pleased at how easy it was to use Twilio.
Yeah.
And Electric Imp made that really easy.
Yeah.
If you're only going to send 10 or 100 texts a month, I think it's free.
Yeah.
Certainly, they send me emails saying, do you want to upgrade? And I'm like, for my one text a year, you must be kidding.
And I'm sure if you had bulk quantity of texts, it wouldn't be that much per text anyway.
No, not really. So you mentioned your daughter, and I wanted to get back to that because it frustrates me when I hear technical women who are unhappy with their lives say how bad it is, and they discourage their daughters from any path that involves computing. You didn't.
I didn't. When my daughter was 10, I got her a GeoCities account and I put some stuff in it, and then I showed her and she was horrified. She said, take it down. And I said, well, you have to do that. And I handed her an HTML manual.
I'm not sure what to call that. It's
child abuse.
Well, it's like handing somebody a bomb and say, defuse this or yeah.
It's not that bad.
No, it's not that bad. I'm just in my mind, I'm thinking, Houdini's son. Okay, kid, get out of these chains.
Well, my daughter, my husband's also an engineer. Well, actually an engineering writer. So, she was probably not going to be able to go too far away from engineering. And she did end up getting a dual degree from UC Santa Cruz in computer science and math. and a master's in computer science from the University of Washington, and she's currently working on her PhD, although she's taking a bit of a break in computer science from the University of Washington.
So really, she's still trying to get down that GeoCities page.
No, well, GeoCities took care of that for her. Exactly. You have to go to the Wayback Machine to see it.
And so how else did you encourage her? Did you maybe put her prom pictures online with little mustaches and she had to take them off?
No, that's about all I was able to do. I mean, she had her own website pretty much after that. And, she could put her own prom pictures up before there was Flickr, actually.
And she did something cool recently because you offered to give up your spot to be on the show so that maybe she could come on. But
my daughter did the website behind Feminist Hacker Barbie, which was, a thing for
a meme.
Yeah, for 3 or 4 days. So basically, there was this hideous computer engineer Barbie book, and it had things like, I
have a quote.
Okay, you got a quote.
I pulled a quote. On one of the pages, there's Barbie is asked, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Creating a game." And well, what is it? And I'm only creating the design ideas. Barbie says laughingly. I'll need Steve and Brian's help to turn it into a real game.
I know.
Which is fine if it was product manager Barbie.
Or designer Barbie. But almost every page of the book was of that ilk.
It was so bad.
So Kathleen gave the internet a chance to correct that, and some of them were just hilarious.
And so she did the website where it would put up a picture and the original text and give you the opportunity to modify the text.
Right.
So that it would match the picture.
Yeah, and then it would give you a place. And then initially it was uploading it to Imager, and then the weird stuff happened, and so you still had the capability to save it and post it to your own Twitter account.
Yeah, and I there were so many of those that went by. I liked the one where somebody said it was very brave of the Brian character to use a pink laptop and go against gender norms.
Oh, yes.
People did a really good job at flipping it on its head.
Yeah.
Without necessarily being mean.
Yeah. And then BBC and...
Yeah, you got a bit of press for that one.
Yeah. So she did an interview on NPR, and the best story about it with the most juicy technical details is in Wired.
Would you have predicted that when she was 10?
Well, there's a lot of things that I've predicted poorly. Like most of anything that's happened in politics in the last 18 years. But I'm not that surprised. I think, a lot of people have that capability, but she just happened to do it with, adequate execution that people could use it and run with it.
Didn't Mattel ever talk to her?
Not that I know of.
What was that look for?
It was not that I know of, and then you were playing.
No, yeah, I don't think so. I think it probably falls into the parody category.
Oh, I hope so.
Oh, there's nothing they could do to her.
Oh, not at all.
Right.
But there's always hassling. That's free, and
actually, Mattel got a lot of publicity, and if they had adequate PR, they could turn it around and saying,
they could sell 2. That's the thing, is if they were smart, they would put out 2 computer engineering Barbies, and people would buy both.
Well, the old one's been pulled. Probably a collector's item now.
Exactly. And yet, I'm not going to go out and buy one.
The cynic in me says they did this on purpose.
Oh, the new Coke debate.
Yeah. I don't know.
No, they probably did not. But
and the original author is getting some grief over it, which is a little unfortunate.
I suspect it's written on spec. I mean, he probably was told. She was probably told.
See what you did?
I know. We have a guest who's coming up at the end of the year, and I wasn't sure which gender because I've only seen the internet name, and it's not indicative. And we had like 4 email back and forths before it was finally signed by a name that was clearly one gender. And I was like, oh, good. Finally, I have a name.
You didn't do a LinkedIn check, or is that, I guess
you have to have a name to do a LinkedIn check.
Oh, okay. Oh, he didn't have a name. The phantom hacker, huh?
Yeah, it was a very phantom hacker.
Not gender specific.
Well, not everybody is. That's fine. We met at the first, talk about long ago.
Yeah, or one of the very early ones.
Bay Area She's Geeky.
Yeah, that's so fun. I try and go every year.
And you spoke about beekeeping, which is...
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Not the first time or the last time you've done that either.
Yeah, at She's Geeky, I've talked about Django, beekeeping, kind of career advice for older women. And last year I did beadwork with my friend who's much better at it than me.
Can you guys describe what She's Geeky is for those of us who
She's Geeky
haven't been or maybe have not heard of it?
Is an unconference for women. So it runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can go any combination of days. And when you get there, you kind of have circle time, which is introductions. And then there's a grid, and you go get this piece of paper and you say, I want to teach a session on this. And you kind of announce it. Then you go put it on the time slot grid and then room grid, and people come to your sessions or not. And you go look at other sessions to attend that you want, that look interesting to you. And it's, as far as conferences go, it's pretty inexpensive. I don't know, maybe $75 a day, maybe less.
Less if you talk to them, if you want to be a gopher, or if you're a student, or if you're younger, or if you have any good excuse, you can probably talk your way into
and
cheaper
I've
tickets.
paid for other people to go just because I wanted them to go.
Yeah, it's not that expensive compared to conferences. And what you were talking about is the unconference part of it.
Right.
The idea that conferences often are the best part is the interstitial time where you meet
the hallway
in the hallway.
track.
And that you shouldn't necessarily stay in a session because you signed up to go. You should be okay with leaving sessions and going in later.
Yeah, definitely.
It's an open space technology, I think is, open space technology.
Yeah.
And She's Geeky uses it, and what it ends up happening is completely random things.
Yeah.
You get beekeeping, you get deep talks about GIMP, and how it works and how to use it properly and how to even modify it. I remember one year there was a whole bunch of people who wanted to know about writing a book. And so I went to that and I said, here's how you do it. There was another author and another woman from O'Reilly. Suzanne Axtell's usually there. And it was just really cool. There are always sessions about how to speak at more formal conferences.
Yeah. I went to an excellent session. It was really more of a workshop because I think she held the attendance down to 6 so we could all practice and get feedback. And that's something that this woman, I think, charges real money to do.
And there are a couple other speakers who charge money.
Yeah.
I've never charged money for teaching soldering, but I did have a good time doing that with Jen one year.
Wait, you taught soldering?
I know, it was really hilarious.
Oh, and last year I brought Arduinos. That was really fun, too.
Oh, maybe we should do one this year.
We could.
So it's, and then the She's Geeky part of it is that it is for women in tech.
Or anything that you self-identify as geeky. Like my friend, the patent attorney. Well, that's geeky to me.
Yes. I mean, whether it's beekeeping or beading or talking about imposter syndrome or there's just, I mean, I think there was a session about writing science fiction. It's whatever you deeply are
I've been to a
about.
session on cryogenics.
Oh, was that the first year with all the futurists came? That was hilarious. I don't think they've been back.
No, it's just this woman who's getting her head frozen when the time comes.
Well, who knows? She talk you into it?
No. It's like, I don't know if I need that.
But it is a good place to meet lots of people. It's where I met you. It's where I met Jen.
Yeah.
I think it was the first time I met BJ Wyszynski. And these are all people, they talk about networks are the most important part. And
yeah.
going to the Embedded Systems Conference is absolutely great for my career, but She's Geeky is a little better for my mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, we should actually get back to, you were here to talk about EVAOS.
Or other engineering things.
Okay, well, what other engineering things?
Well, I'm into Python and Django. I'm a member of PyLadies.
So you said Django a few times. I actually don't know what that is. So
Django is the Python.
Assuming it was a language of some sort.
It's a web development framework, roughly equivalent to Ruby on Rails, but it's written in Python for Python.
Oh, interesting. I don't think I've heard of using Python that way.
Yeah, and it's spelled with a D, like the movie. And
like the guitarist.
Originally, yeah, right. Yes,
the movie.
Yes, you're right. It is the original gypsy guitarist Django Reinhardt.
So what got you into that?
Well, I've been a member of BayPIGgies, the Bay Area Python interest group, for years and years and years, and
Python has so many great names surrounding it.
Yeah, and I go to. Well, there was actually a big controversy, Python interest group, and the name had been BayPIGgies, and someone took offense, and there was a vote
for all piggy kind.
Yeah, and there was a vote, and this person lost, and we never saw this person again, but the name remained.
Oh, wow.
And now that person has gone on to form Bay Area Pie Groundhogs. It isn't as alliterative, but it still works.
Yeah.
So I've used Python half dozen times seriously. And every time I do, I think, wow, this is really great. I should use this more for stuff. And yet I still forget about it the next time I come around. Convince me that I need to spend more time learning and using Python.
Well, Python, I guess one of its many mottos is, I came for the language, I stayed for the community. The Python community was one of the first programming organizations I know of that had a code of conduct. But I think Python is relatively easy to learn. In fact, MIT is now using it for their introductory course.
Really?
Instead of Scheme, which is a list-based thing.
Wow, we were using that a few years ago that I won't name the number because it was
years ago
large in our introductory course.
And it has a lot of different libraries, so you can do pretty much anything you can think of.
Right.
I mean, it still is a script-based thing, but there's implementations that are faster than others. However, it's probably limited if you want to do, tablet and phone development. It doesn't have a good solution for that. But for a web app or a standalone computer app, it's great.
Even for Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone Black have really good Python implementations. And
it's not so great for embedded system programming either. I think we're still using C that's been around for 30 years now.
Sometimes we do C++.
There is some drive to get scripting kinds of languages onto micros. But
the Hackaday entries was a Python compiler /board.
I've heard of, there's some sort of MicroPython which is working towards that, but I'm not sure how mature it is.
I think it'll happen, but I think, there needs to be a really good reason. And I think with the drive to make microcontrollers more of an educational platform, I think that reason is starting to exist more. Where you don't necessarily want to force 10 and 11-year-olds to learn C or C++.
Although I think the Arduino IDE is a pretty good compromise.
Yes.
It doesn't... I think you can actually do pointers in it if you really, really want to. But,
you definitely can.
But you don't... But you can do almost everything you need to do without it.
Well, and the tricky bit with Python on something like that is Python is so great because it's so expressive, right? You can, in a single line, you can do string manipulations that, and C would take many, many lines or functions, and that's hard to have that kind of library and support on a small device.
Well, I think the cool thing about Python is that you can think of things in terms of lists or dictionaries and manipulate them easily. And if your problem fits into that, it's so great that you don't have to wrestle C into it or build those things in order to solve your problem.
Yeah.
Well, and I've used NumPy and SciPy.
Yeah.
Which, since I never really could pay for MATLAB, we had a student copy for a while, and occasionally I would work with clients who would have copies, but it's sad when I don't have access to that amazing, wonderful tool. And now NumPy and SciPy.
Well,
yeah, they're pretty awesome.
There is Octave, which works almost identically to MATLAB.
Although, now, what is coming... There's something on the Raspberry Pi that you get for free, like MATLAB or Wolfram or something.
That's Mathematica. Well, Wolfram is Mathematica.
Maybe it's Mathematica.
Which is different. Mathematica is more suited towards symbolic kinds of mathematics and solving, whereas MATLAB's more...
numerics.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to get better at using...
Condescension.
Is that what that
Sorry, that was from last week.
Anyway, I do want to improve my graphing skills with NumPy and SciPy. I've done a little bit, and they're really awesome.
Yeah, I think as a second language for embedded software engineers, Python is definitely my choice.
Well, it's great for scripting things, too, if you want to write tests that talk to your device over
Quick and
Serial
dirty.
or something.
Yeah, Serial or Internet. I mean, there's so many different ways it can be used.
And where Django really shines is if you need to have some sort of web app that has a database behind it.
Which is every web app, pretty much.
I mean, remember 20 years ago when you just stored your data in some weird file format you made up yourself?
And now you use JSON?
No, I now some things just go to the database.
Yeah. Well, Christopher, you're working on something that may need some web appiness.
No, I'm not.
All right.
Well, I mean, there's...
Okay.
Well, what is it?
Does Django run on the web side or on the server side?
It runs on the server side.
Yeah.
It talks to your server's databases.
Okay.
So it's the back end.
So I was wrong.
It's the back end, and then it presents pages to your browser.
Yeah, and the thing I'm working on has a back end of its own, and then I'm just talking to that.
Okay. I was thinking about the times that I've had to do interesting web pages served by my device. And you can put JavaScript in there in order to get prettier things.
Yeah.
And it's always really kind of made my brain hurt to embed JavaScript files inside my Flash so that I could run it from my embedded system.
That does seem kind of icky.
Well, if you want...
Yeah, I mean, but if it solves the problem.
Yeah, it was the best solution I had. I even thought about trying to speak at a JavaScript conference, and then I'm like, who are you going to talk to?
And you're just going to say things they don't want to hear.
I know, they're going to say I'll say, well, we need to keep JavaScript small so we can do this. And they're going to be like, please stop talking.
Well, when my daughter Kathleen did the Hacker Barbie app, it only took her a day because she was a pretty experienced Django developer. And it's a semi-sophisticated application.
Yeah, it has all the pictures and all of the text, and then you can have more text.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Only a day. I've spent like a week on this ring.
Don't ask me how long I've spent trying to do basic electronics this week.
Christopher got his first SparkFun box this week.
Wow.
Yes. And then somebody considered stealing it.
I considered hiding it for a couple of hours so that we could go to Halted in case so you wouldn't get distracted by the shiny red box. Which you didn't. You did very well.
But then we went to Halted and you still didn't buy anything for yourself, so I don't really understand why you...
I just like to pet the equipment.
You know what I do when I go to Halted? Well, I've done this enough. but they have some used test equipment, and they have 7B80 and 7B85 Tektronix 7000 series plugins. And I always go look at each one to see if my name is on the calibration sticker, because that was from my first job when I was 21 years old.
I do occasionally see things that I remember from, not that I necessarily had anything to do with directly, but things that were common around the time I started, and they're just, in piles in the really old stuff. It's like, oh, geez.
However, if I did find one, I'd have to buy it, and I don't have a mainframe to put it in.
I'm trying to think of all things like that I could do. And I remember when my toy that I had been working on was made fun of on The Simpsons, and I felt like that was some sort of giant win for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, the Simpsons are kind of a cultural milestone.
I've made it. I've made it. Yay! So, EVAOS. Really, I'm somehow going to get back on track here.
Does it run Python anywhere? Sorry.
No, the only Python I'm doing is for my Django inventory control app, which I kind of do on nights and weekends.
What kind of firmware is in it? I mean, it sounds like it works. So, what other firmware development are you doing, or is your minion doing?
It's the PIC. We use the PIC MX32 series, and so there's a microchip IDE, and it's in C.
And that runs the battery management.
That talks to the battery management system. It talks to the sensors. It talks to the drive control unit. So there's a user display. So we a button to go in and out of hybrid mode, and some diagnostic screens, and a picture of the battery that says how much charge you're on. So that PIC controls all of that, and it gets all of its information from the CAN bus from the other processors.
Who chose the PIC?
My guy Dan, because that was what he was most familiar with.
Wait, let me guess. He was a double E.
No, he's not a double E.
Really?
He's a firmware guy.
Well, let's see.
He's 90%. He's a pretty good double E, even though he sometimes says, I'm not an electrical engineer.
Well, I just don't want this to really break my confirmation bias with respect to double E's
picking picks.
Double E's like picks, and software engineers like what Atmel makes or what TI makes.
Yeah, I think our partners use the TI chip, at least one of them. I don't know what there's a couple of them. I don't actually know what processors are in them, but the drive control unit has some sort of TI CAN enabled, or processor with CAN bus.
Yeah. Honestly,
I think it's probably what you were exposed to first, and since most micros of those classes do kind of the same stuff, it's like,
yeah,
well,
really.
PIC did a good job of actually giving the IDE away for free, so you didn't have to spend a lot of money on it.
And it feels like such a waste to spend money on them, because they just are not very good.
Although he is not very happy with Microchip's new MZ processor, and they force you into their new IDE, and we actually went down that path for a way. He said the processor wasn't ready, and we had to go back to the MX. It was more that the IDE wasn't ready, too. They hadn't ported all the libraries.
What?
You've worked at companies. You know why.
Yeah, I
know.
Microchip appears to me has gone on this acquisition binge, and they're not as efficient as the Borg at assimilating other companies. And so they just have to kind of grind it out.
Christopher, do you have anything else to ask?
Well, I was still on the car. I had more questions on the truck.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
Do you have... So it seems like in this day and age, it's popular to put all kinds of logging and phone home and radio. And do you keep track of these trucks? Do you have GPS of your own?
No, we do not have that, although we do have...
You sound exasperated.
No. We don't. No, I mean that we don't have telematics. We just have some logging of CAN bus and other measurements that we will have to go physically extract or plug in a USB stick somehow.
Do you look at a Bluetooth app for your truck owners?
We haven't done that yet. In fact, the military bases are all...
Oh, they don't want that.
They don't want any
Not at
sort
all.
of Wi-Fi at all.
Okay.
They
probably don't want you calling home over 3G either.
They don't. So I think in the future products we will have that, but for now it wasn't necessary.
What are you excited about doing next?
I'm going to be excited to see those trucks loaded on that carrier.
Shipping things.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a good place for us to stop asking you questions and let you get on with your weekend.
Well, thank you. It's been great.
Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I've been not frequent enough listener to your podcast, but it's great and keep it up.
Thank you. My guest has been Vicky Tuite, engineering manager at EVAOS, maker of a truck hybrid
Kit.
Thank you. And thank you to Christopher White for producing and co-hosting. Thank you all for listening and those extra birthday stars. If you'd like to say hello to us, email show@embedded.fm or hit the contact link on embedded.fm. I'll have Vicky's Twitter handle on the show notes, but if you want to reach her, go ahead and email us and I'll forward it along.
Or I can say it. It's VIXTER55
At
Twitter. That's my Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
Twitter handle.
Cool. And I have one thing to leave you with for this week, a joke, because, hey. And it's from Neil Patrick Harris. I wish I'd thought of this joke myself. I drive a Toyota Prius. I named mine Judas. Judas Prius.